Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to today's meeting of the Raleigh City Council. Before we begin, I just want to acknowledge Shop Local Raleigh, Black Dollar, and Shaw Divinity School and Reverend Hall for helping us organize our prayer vigil at Moore Square on Saturday. We prayed for unity and we prayed for peace. And I would like to ask all of us now just to hold a moment of silence to do the same, and also pray for the family of Jacob Blake and all victims of violence. Moment of silence, please. Okay, thank you very much. We are beginning today's meeting with a consent agenda. Nothing has been pulled from consent, so could I ask for motion to approve?
Move for approval.
Okay, Mayor Pro Tem Branch, second. Councilor Fort, all in favor? Opposed? Clerk, that passes unanimously. We also have on here recognition of special awards. Is that, City Manager, is that happening today?
No, Mayor, not unless you have any items. We don't have any recognitions today.
Okay. Next, we have the report and recommendation of the Planning Commission. Good afternoon, Ken.
Good afternoon, Ken Bowers, Planning and Development. We have 3 items to report out. Hopefully my slides will be up here in a second. No request for time extensions this time, just 3 items to be scheduled for public hearing. Just to show you that currently there's nothing on the October 6th public hearing schedule, so we're recommending that for all of these, although we understand there may be a desire to schedule one of these items, the first one, for an earlier public hearing. So this is the list of, we have 3 items reported out from Planning Commission, all with recommendations to approve. Z720 on East Millbrook Road, that's in District A, it's located behind Quail Corners. Z1120 Chapel Hill Road and Gary Street in District D, and Z1220 on Prince Drive in District D. And again, staff recommendation was originally for the Tuesday public hearing, evening public hearing on October 6th, but we understand that there is a desire for Z720 potentially to move in an earlier public hearing. So that concludes the Planning Commission report, unless you have questions or require further detail.
Okay, thank you very much, Ken. Was there a request by one of the council members, Councilor Buffkin?
Yes, thank you, Mayor. Members of council, I'm happy to report that case Z720 has largely been agreed to. I've been in communication with the applicant and the neighbors that are interested, and they've largely reached consensus. At least that's my understanding at this point. And so as Mr. Bowers suggested, I'm going to ask that the council schedule this matter for September 15th rather than the recommended October 6th.
Okay, is that a motion?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay,
I make that motion.
Okay, do I have a second? Councilor Stewart, all in favor? Anyone opposed? Okay, clerk, that passes unanimously, and that's for September 15th. The other 2 items are recommended for October 6th. Do we have a motion to approve? Councilor Stewart? Second? Councilor Fort? All in favor? Okay, those 2 items will be scheduled to October 6th. Next is special items. And first on the agenda is the Affordable Housing Bond Follow-up Report.
Good afternoon, Larry Jarvis, Housing and Neighborhoods.
Good afternoon, Larry.
So our agenda for today is to recap the elements and the policy objectives we've previously taken a look at the proposed combined funding matrix, report out on existing income targeting by program, and then look at specific policy options for greater number of 30% AMI income targeting. And this was something that was specifically requested and recommended by the Housing Bond Advisory Committee. So again, the overall policy focus here was equitable development around transit. There are 5 elements or buckets: transit-oriented site acquisition, public-private partnerships, low-income housing tax credit, gap financing, owner-occupied rehab, and down payment assistance. And if you recall, the last 2 were to address long-term homeowners near the future transit improvements to make sure that they could remain in place with fully functional and handicap accessible homes, and the down payment assistance to make it possible for low to moderate income folks to buy homes near the transit improvements, hopefully with some missing middle products. So with respect to the 30% AMI targeting, the 2 of the 5 bond elements or buckets lend themselves to the 30% AMI, and those are the public-private partnerships and the gap financing. In your backup materials, you did have a combined funding matrix that looked not only at our bond dollars, but our federal dollars, local dollars, and even the CARES Act money over the next 5 years. And using very conservative assumptions, we tried to project out the number of units, number of beneficiaries, but again, very conservative assumptions, but it does show the full spectrum of income groups that are being served. And you would notice that the per unit average subsidy in the gap financing was increased based on anticipated greater 30% targeting. And again, this is the piece from a combined matrix that just shows bond expenditures, but again, you do have in your backup materials one that shows all sources of funding. So now to report out on our current income targeting and voucher holders. What we looked at were the 13 most recent tax credit projects placed in service, the 6 most recent permanent supportive housing projects placed in service, and information from the Raleigh Housing Authority about public housing and in Section 8. And again, we created a survey instrument to obtain this information from the tax credit developers. So in those 13 most recently funded projects, we found that while only 14% of the units were required to target 30% AMI, 37% of the units were actually occupied by 30% AMI households, and 40% of the tenants were voucher holders. So it's the folks with the vouchers who are primarily able to rent the units, again, with incomes at 30% AMI. In looking at the 6 most recent permanent supportive housing projects, only 3% were required to target 30% AMI, but actually 43% of the units were occupied by 30% in 30% households. And again, that was because 46% of the tenants overall had vouchers. In looking at the housing authority, 76% public housing units are occupied by 30% AMI or below. Over 83% of the voucher holders have 30% AMI or income or less. About 300 vouchers become available annually. Only about 30% of those new eligible voucher holders actually locate an available unit. Looking at the waiting list for public housing, over 4,000 households on the Section 8 waiting list, over 6,500 households. and there were 1,925 households that were on both waiting lists. So in considering the 30% AMI policy objective, it's kind of necessary to set some baseline parameters. So as we've indicated here, a rental project where all the units are targeting 30% AMI cannot support any debt service, and they don't generate sufficient rental income to cover operating expenses. So then typically what you see is that 30% AMI units have to be mixed with higher income targets for the project to be viable and sustainable. In the most cost-effective way, it remains with the tax credit program, although it can be done with nonprofit partners as well. So something we put on the table just for council consideration is out of the $28 million in the public-private partnership, as we've mentioned before, setting aside $10 million for permanent supportive housing for very low-income, chronically homeless individuals, specifically folks with mental illness. $10 million for nonprofit partners to create or preserve small-scale projects where at least a third of the units serve 30% AMI. And then, as we've discussed before, $8 million for what we would call voluntary inclusionary projects. The greatest way, though, to create the 30% AMI is with the tax credit program. We're suggesting that we require or incentivize that 25% of the units in 9% projects target 30% AMI, and in 4% requiring or incentivizing 10% at 30% AMI. And again, the subsidy required to do that will be more than we've had in the past, and it will result in fewer total units. But again, we think that's a good balance. And with that, happy to entertain any questions.
Okay, hold on one second. Let me get everybody up on the screen. Councillor Buffkin, then Councillor Stewart, I believe, and then Mayor Pro Tem Branch.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Mr. Jarvis. First, I'd like to say that the materials in our agenda packet are an impressive piece of work, and it lays out exactly what I was looking for in terms of putting our proposed bond funding in the context of our existing locally funded programs and our federally funded programs. And I think it paints a clear picture that this bond funding is needed to complement our existing programs. So focusing on the question of how much funding should emphasize supporting the needs of those making 30% AMI and below. And I saw in your memo at the bottom of page 2 and in your slide, you had stated that a rental project where all the units have rents affordable at 30% AMI would not be able to support any debt service and would not generate sufficient rental income to cover operating expenses. And I understand this in practical terms, and I'm hoping that you can kind of translate this for me, that if we pursued this approach, the city essentially would have to come up with the cash to build the project and be ready to provide an annual subsidy for the operating costs. Is that right?
That's essentially it, yes.
Thank you. And if I could, just one brief follow-up. So a consequence of that approach then is that the city would be able to support far fewer households, far fewer affordable units, because our bond funding being fixed at $80 million, our cost per unit would go up substantially. Am I understanding that correct?
That is correct as well, yes.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Councillor Stewart.
Thank you, Mayor. Larry, this is great data information and just kind of good facts to make sure we understand what's going on in our community. One of the things I'm super interested in is this wait list that we're seeing. So we've got two wait lists, one that's 4,000 plus and one that's 6,000 plus. And I'm wondering if you can kind of walk through, if I have a voucher and I'm looking for a place, did I see that there is a 60% chance that I will not be able to use my voucher because there are no available units?
That is correct. And it's not always going to be the case that it's just not an available unit. There might be other barriers, such as poor credit and eviction history, things of that nature that are barriers as well. But the primary one we know is that all of our existing affordable products have waiting lists, so it is very hard when that voucher just happens to become available for people to find units. And that's why our focus in my tenure here has been on increasing the supply.
And remind me, if you have a voucher, you only have to pay 30% of your income towards your rent. The voucher covers the rest, but you can go into a unit that is up to fair market value or 100% AMI.
Fair market value is a requirement, and then they pay 30% of their income towards rent and utilities, and HUD pays the rest.
Okay, so you feel like I really, for me, what seems to be more important is this supply piece. If we have an incredibly long waiting list at Raleigh Housing Authority and folks aren't able to find units, we need more units, whether they're at 30% or 80%. But what you've presented today is what you feel strikes a good balance between we need more units at 30% and making sure we don't significantly undercut the amount of units we could build that would help folks with vouchers and otherwise.
We attempted to strike what we thought was a good balance, being responsive to the legitimate concerns of the Affordable Housing Bond Advisory Committee and making sure that we were still able to generate a substantial number of units through the tax credit program.
Great, thank you.
Mayor Pro Tem Branch.
First of all, I want to thank my colleagues for their questions and points that they made, because they're definitely valid, that, having targets will impact overall units. But I think at this point in this time, this shift, and I want to thank staff for making this shift, to be intentional. Being intentional and helping the least of these is really the role of government. For us finally putting things kind of in writing that kind of meet some of the numbers that are there and hopefully, exceeded. I think that's the ultimate goal, is exceeded. And then also this will send a message to the market of the need to help, all of our residents in building our next development units, but also across the city. I think we have to be, make sure that as we look at these tax credits, though I know there's one later seeking approval, we have to have approval for units in my district because we need to diversify the rest of the city. So I pray that these targets and understandings will drive the market to do just that. And I just want to thank staff for this work. And I did have questions, but my counterparts took my questions, so I'm good for now.
Okay, Councillor Cox.
Just to understand, how many units are we committing to at 30% AMI and less?
Well, that would be a function of how many tax credit applications we receive annually. But again, most of our production has been through the 4% program. So over the past 5 years, under the 4% program, we've done around 2,000 units. So we're talking 10% of those. So if we achieve the same number of units going forward, that would be 200 units under the 4% program alone. And in the past, with the 4% program, none of the units were targeted at 30% AMI.
None. Okay. So we're kind of leaving it up to whatever the market decides. We're not actually making a commitment.
No, well, the suggestion is that we would require or incentivize for 4% products that 10% of the units have to be at 30% AMI. And with the 9% projects require that 25% of the units target 30% AMI.
Okay, and that's what is that? One of the buckets? You said two of the 5 buckets are lended. I'm sorry, you said 2 of the 5 buckets lend themselves to 30% AMI housing. That what do the other 3 buckets lend themselves to? And of the ones that do lend themselves to, those are the only buckets that we're going to have 30% AMI come from?
What I tried to do in the background memo was in the bucket that is site acquisition, that ultimately, if we acquire future sites for tax credit development, that the units would be produced at that point in time, but the act of acquisition itself would not create any units. There might be some existing naturally occurring affordable housing that is acquired out of that bucket. But if there are 30% AMI units, it's just preserving what exists. It doesn't create anything more. With the homeowner rehab, it's conceivable that we might have some existing homeowners who are at 30% AMI that we assist. But what we typically see is that, you know, most of our low-income homeowners have incomes 50 to 80% AMI. So again, it would be just kind of an incidental here and there homeowner at 30% AMI. And the other on down payment assistance, again, the sweet spot for assisting low mod folks get into home ownership is 60 to 80% AMI.
Okay.
Councilor Melton?
Yes, thank you for this information. I've been trying to look at this proposed bond package holistically and trying to really understand the scope of housing issues that we have in our city. And I think producing more units affordable at the lowest point for our most vulnerable residents is extremely important. But I'm concerned that if we center the discussion only on that issue, that we are going to not be addressing some other very real problems in the city as well. And one that I can think of is the issue with displacement, where individuals' homes fall into disrepair or don't keep up with the tax value, and those individuals are pushed out of their neighborhoods, long-term residents. And so allocating money towards owner-occupied home rehabilitation, in my opinion, addresses a problem that could very well make our need for more affordable units worse. Because if folks are getting pushed out of their houses, then we need even more new units to house them. So I want to make sure that we are thinking about this holistically. Also, with regard to the transit-oriented site acquisition, I think we've seen in some other cities that as they've implemented big transit projects, that the land around those projects get bought up very quickly by market rate developers. And so the folks who are able to live near the new transit routes are probably folks that can afford a car or other ways to get around. And the people who are really dependent upon frequent, reliable transit get pushed out. So I do think it's really important for us to allocate money for a transit-oriented site acquisition as well. So I know we've had discussion about buckets. I think it's extremely important that the new units we are producing are focused at our most vulnerable residents, but I don't want to disregard the concerns and discussions around some other issues as well, like transit-oriented site acquisition and like long-term residents being able to stay in their home by providing money for them to rehabilitate their own property.
Okay. Councilor Stewart?
Thank you, Mayor. We've also had some, I want to bring this up at the table. We've had some emails come in asking us if we can direct bond money to help folks who are facing this eviction crisis that we're getting ready to get slammed with because of COVID. And I want to make sure that we state clearly here what we have already done on that, and that these monies are not legally allowed to be used in that manner. So if Larry, you could address that and mention how much money we've already sent from CARES and otherwise, please, that would be great. Thank you.
The CARES Act contracts are now just being executed and the money deployed in the community, so we really don't have much to report. And that was around $2.5 million. And we have been allocated an additional $3.5 million under the Emergency Solutions Grant Program. And what we wanted to do was to get some experience, on the ground with our nonprofit partners to find out, what's working, who's performing, are there gaps that we need to address with this additional money. Our hope is that all of our partners are going to perform very well, and what we can simply do is take that $3.5 million for the most part and just add to the existing contracts and lengthen the term of assistance so they can keep assisting folks. but bond proceeds would not be something that we could use for that purpose. But we can use local dollars, but not bond dollars.
Good, thank you. That's all, Mayor.
Councilor Branch?
Yes. As far as the CARES Act funding for dealing with evictions, when will that information be available for residents or accessible?
It's on our website now. I can get the link to everybody if you'd like.
Yes, please. Thank you. I'm done.
Any additional questions? Okay, I would like to make a motion to approve the targets that were outlined in Larry's proposal. So that would be 10 million toward a permanent supportive housing community, 10 million to nonprofit partners to create or preserve small-scale projects, and then additional 8 million to partnerships that, coupled with the equitable development regulatory incentives, create new rental developments. You also, Larry, outlined a plan for 9% tax credits and 4% tax credits. I'd like that included in this motion as well. And I am asking for a second. Councilor Branch. Okay, all in favor? Okay, opposed? Okay, clerk, that was 7 in favor with Councilor Cox opposed. Thank you for your good work, Larry. I thought one of the things that I think we need to do is, I was pleasantly surprised to see that of the tax credit projects, almost 40% were occupied by people at 30% or below AMI. I think we probably need to do find new ways to communicate information about what we're doing and what we're achieving. But I commend you on that work. That was really important data to have at our fingertips. So thank you. Okay, next we have the City Employee Volunteers Election Day 2020.
Mayor, if I could. Yeah, thank you, Mayor and Council. Just very briefly, Council had asked for us to consider options to encourage city employees to assist on Election Day, and we reviewed our HR policies, and what we've been able to determine is that we can use an existing provision of administrative leave to offer that for our employees. It's up to about 20 hours if you include the necessary training time as well as the setup the previous evening. They would still need to get, the employees would still need to get approval from their supervisor. There is a small payment that the elections board provides for volunteers that help. It's either $215 or $300, round numbers, and that would be also fine. And so assuming we could work through the supervisor approval, we would simply allow that to occur under our administrative leave provision today. That allows us to do that very quickly. And so the manager has that associated discretion, so we can just go ahead and move forward with that. Council wants to express support, you're certainly welcome to do that, but that's our proposal to encourage assistance on Election Day from our employees. One other thing, I would use the word encourage. I think that is still an employee choice. That's not something we want to direct. So with that, we're ready to move forward, but wanted to make sure that you were supportive.
Yes, I'm very grateful that you did this so quickly, and the solution you came up with. As everyone knows, we are going to need poll workers on Election Day. So encouraging city employees to do this, if their heart's in it, I think would be great. So thank you. Any other comments from the council? Okay, I'm just seeing thumbs up, so good. All right, the next is the city manager vacancy, recruitment and search process. I believe Fagan is going to guide us through this.
Mayor, if I could, I believe Mr. Stackhouse, our Human Resources Director, is here to answer any questions you may ask. We don't have a formal presentation.
Okay.
Madam Mayor and members of council, Fagan Stackhouse, Human Resources Director. I'm here and available to answer any questions you might have regarding the brochure, the job description, and the process going forward.
Councillor Cox?
So just to be clear and to be on the record about it, we're going to conduct our own search for a city manager. We're not going to engage any kind of outside firm to help us. And then we will be responsible entirely for everything, including background checks and so forth. Is that correct?
That is correct. We've done it in a number of situations. All of our department heads, for the most part, in the last several recruitments, and so we feel pretty confident that we can do that and check on things. We do have an organization out there that does some of the background work for us, and so we would be utilizing them as well.
Okay.
Any other comments? I thought the brochure was excellent, really well developed. I also thought that it addressed the issues that we are currently facing. And I think it's important for us to be communicating that to prospective applicants. So if everybody's okay with it, do we need a formal vote to approve the process and move forward? Fagan, do we need a formal vote on that?
I would think it would be good of the council to provide a vote, and then that support, we would move on and follow the schedule that we laid out, and we could then work with you and give you updates. And we were thinking somewhere around the end of September, given that we would have very successful and very well qualified candidates. We would then begin to look at those candidates and screen down from there.
Okay.
Vote would be welcomed.
All right. Do I have a motion to approve the search? Okay.
Yeah, I move that we move forward. I move that we move forward with the proposal and target dates in the agenda.
Okay. And Councillor Fort has seconded that. All in favor? Any opposed? Clerk, that passes unanimously. Okay, thank you very much. That was great work, by the way. Report and recommendation to the city manager. The first item is the affordable housing location policy request for waiver for the Sussex.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. Again, Larry Jarvis with Housing and Neighborhoods will be coming forward to give you a brief presentation and ask for your approval.
So as the manager indicated, we are here today to request a waiver to the affordable housing location policy for a project known as the Sussex. It will be a 216-unit affordable rental project for individuals and families. 72% will be at 50% AM, 72 units at 50% AMI or below, 72 at 60% AMI, and 72 units at 70% AMI. Included in those totals, 22 units would be set aside for Wake County's permanent supportive housing voucher program, and that primarily serves 30% AMI and below, and 22 units set aside for key voucher holders, and these are people with mental illness and qualify for disability income. Funding would be provided in part by Wake County, which was committed $2.8 million towards the project. And of course, the 4% tax credit, equity and bond financing. No city funds were requested for this project. And again, it's located on North Rogers Lane. For some of the newer members of council, just a reminder of the affordable housing location policy objectives to increase the supply of affordable housing in underserved locations near employment centers, employment and commercial centers, encourage development of affordable housing in existing and proposed transit services, provide affordable housing in or near downtown and in neighborhoods having approved revitalization plans. An objective was also to prevent further concentrations of minority and low-income persons in subsidized housing. So the Sussex is located in a minority-concentrated census tract. It does not meet any exceptions or exemptions to the policy, but council may grant a waiver. So again, should you choose to grant the waiver, the next steps would be that the Wake County Housing Authority would hold a public hearing in September to approve the bond issuance, and then vote on the passing of the bond resolution. And then subsequently, at a date to be determined, council would be asked to approve the bond resolution of the Wake Housing Authority. So I will be happy to answer any questions.
Mayor Pro Tem Branch.
So I don't have any questions, but I do know where this property is located. We did a rezoning probably 18 months ago for apartments in this area. It's right across, it's in walking distance from Anderson Point Park as well. Where this will be right beside a local elementary school that was recently built on Rogers Lane. So just based on the surroundings and the location, it's outside the belt line. I do feel good about this project. But again, I do want to press the point of my other counselors helping me find locations within your district so we do not have to continue to have these waivers. That's all I have.
Councilor Branch, are you in favor of the project then, the waiver?
I'm in favor, and I move to approve the project, the waiver.
Councilor Cox, are you seconding? Okay. Councilor Cox is second. All in favor? Opposed? Clerk, that passes unanimously. Thank you, Larry. Next, we have the Neuse River Resource Recovery Facility Bioenergy Recovery Project, GMP.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. As Aaron Brower comes forward from Raleigh Water, I just wanted to take a moment to thank the staff as well as the council for your continuous support on a really an innovative and sustainable project that is of considerable size and complexity, but with tremendous environmental benefits for our community, and in many ways will represent us as one of the world leaders on this topic. It gets a little complicated, and it has a lot of technical terms in it, and Aaron's going to explain that in a way hopefully that citizens can interpret. But this is perhaps one of your more exciting, sustainable environmental initiatives that's been going on for several years, and it'll take several years to build. But when it's done, the benefits to the community is going to be exemplary. So with that, I'll turn it over to Aaron Brower with Raleigh Water to walk you through that and then ask for your approval to move forward.
Thank you, Manager. And getting the presentation pulled up here, but good afternoon, Mayor and Council. Again, my name is Aaron Brower with Raleigh Water, and I am here to talk to you today about a very exciting project that we dubbed the Bioenergy Recovery Project. First, for those that may not, some of you guys have seen this and some have not, but I'd like to show a brief animation to kind of familiarize you with the gist of the project. And we worked through the animation earlier, so I think it's going to work, but let me know or raise a hand. I can see Ruffin and Councilor Melton, so raise a hand if it's not.
The Bioenergy Recovery Project is one example of how we're investing in critical infrastructure now in order to conserve energy and protect the environment in the future. Located at our Neuse River Resource Recovery Facility, The project will change how we treat waste at our main treatment plant. We'll use cutting-edge technology to more sustainably manage biosolids residuals. And it will all begin in your home. With every flush, you will help generate clean energy. Let's take a look. From the toilet in your house, contents travel through pipes to the Neuse River Resource Recovery Facility. Solids are a byproduct of the wastewater treatment process. These solids are directed to the solids handling process. There, screens are used to separate solids from the liquid. The Bioenergy project will use an advanced, innovative pre-treatment method called thermal hydrolysis process, or THP, to precondition and pasteurize the solids. Think of it as a giant pressure cooker that will essentially cook the sludge. The result? A nearly 50% reduction in biosolids. The solids that remain will be of higher quality and will be used as valuable soil conditioner on area, fields, and farms. And that's not all. The new process will also produce biogas. It's estimated this will help fuel up to 50 buses per day. We are building the future with you in mind. Greener, more sustainable for generations to come.
All right, thank you for that. Just want to go over briefly some of the drivers for change. The plant was originally constructed, and this is the Neuse River Resource Recovery Facility, formerly the Neuse River Wastewater Treatment Plant. It was originally constructed in 1974, and you can imagine the environment associated with this type of industrial application, and much of the equipment and the buildings are in very poor condition. So we knew that we needed to move forward with some sort of new biosolids campus and expand the campus due to increased solids loadings to the plant. Our current, the other thing is our current biosolids application practices are in jeopardy from a regulatory standpoint. We currently produce what's called a Class B product. There is some regulatory uncertainty on whether or not that will be a long-term sustainable product to be able to land apply to farmland. And the product here that we'll be producing will be, as Ruffin had mentioned earlier, literally a world-class facility and a world-class product. At the time that we initiated this project, there were only 65 units, thermal hydrolysis units in the entire world. This project is so important that it has been identified as the city's, on the city's Climate Energy Action Plan, and also in the city's strategic plan under Growth and Natural Resources 3.1, and then subsequently moved to Transportation and Transit 4.1. So some of the 5 key benefits, which some of these were touched on during the animation, it will produce a reusable biogas in the form of compressed natural gas that we will inject into a new pipeline that Dominion Energy is currently laying across our Neuse River plant property. And it'll be cleaned and then injected there and then extracted at the bus filling station off of Barwell Road. It is green energy, and therefore it did qualify for a $50 million 0% loan from the state. As I discussed earlier, the regulatory resiliency associated with the end product that we will be getting from this project. We will be using it as it will be a land applied product as a soil conditioner. And also, on top of all that, one of the great things about it is we are reducing the solids by about 50%, which will minimize the amount of trucks and the travel time and all the fuel associated with that to get it to the farmlands that we land apply. Here is some project information that I would like to share. The design is complete. Construction began in July of last year. And we are still anticipating a construction completion date of late 2022, early 2023. The project funding cost, or the total construction cost, is $177 million. That's the construction component. We did receive the $50 million 0% loan, as I mentioned earlier. and the remainder of our funds will be coming from current and future revenue bonds. Here is a drone image of the site as it exists today. I think I don't have my mouse anymore. But you can see the two tanks on the tall tanks on the left-hand side. Those are the two new anaerobic digesters. If you look at the one the closest to you, if you look down, that's an 80-foot long office trailer. So that can kind of give you some perspective on the size and the scope of this project and the plan itself. And if you squint really hard, you can see an F-150 on there. To date, here are the council action items that have occurred associated with the construction manager at risk contract. The original contract was approved in June 2017, and those were for pre-construction services. So the construction manager worked with our design consultants throughout the process to make sure that we had a nice buildable project at the end of the design. That contract amount was $597,000. In June of 2019, we bid the early site work packages and some select equipment for a guaranteed maximum price that we received from the construction manager in the amount of $35 million. In October of 2019, we also bid the meat of the project, the screening building, preconditioning, the thermal hydrolysis, and anaerobic digesters. So some of that construction that you just saw on that drone footage or the drone photo that I just showed, and that package is $98 million. So one of the reasons why we're here today is we are in a position to move forward with the third guaranteed maximum price, and we thought that that would be an excellent opportunity to update you on the project as well. We have, over the last couple of months, bid the final dewatering building, the steam supply, and gas cleaning. So that'll be the gas that's cleaned and injected into the pipeline, and then some additional chemical system upgrades. Those publicly bid packages, along with the general conditions for the construction manager, total $43,689,475. So staff's recommendation for you today is to authorize the city manager to execute guaranteed maximum price contract amendment number 3 with Crowder Construction Company in amount not to exceed $43,689,475. And with that, I'll take any questions.
Do we have any questions for Aaron? Councilor Knight?
Well, not a question, just a statement of I'm excited about this project, and I think it's great. It's cutting edge. It's going to save us money and time and energy in the long run, and it goes towards our greater goals of sustainability for the city. And so very excited and supportive of the project, and look forward to getting it constructed. Thank you.
Any other comments? I just want to say that this is pretty amazing work, pretty incredible, and really shows us embracing innovation and new ideas. So thank you. Do I have a motion to approve? Councilor Stewart? You making the motion to approve? Seconded by Councilor Knight. All in favor? Opposed? Okay, clerk, that passes unanimously. So number 3 on my agenda was Crowder Construction Company, but I take it that that was covered as part of this. And the next item is Raleigh Water Utility Payments Update.
Yes, thank you, Mayor and Council. This is just an information item, an update for you related to the discussion of how we're managing water payments during the current pandemic and associated economic impacts. We don't have all the answers laid out today. We just wanted to sort of touch base with you on what some of our thoughts were. We have gotten some indications recently from the state about some of their executive orders, and we're continuing to work through with that. So I would suggest that this is viewed as update and feedback. We don't have any specific decisions to deal with today. So with that, Aaron Brower with Raleigh Water.
Thank you, Ruffin. As Ruffin mentioned, give Michelle just a little time here. As Ruffin mentioned, I would like to give you an update on the utility payments to date, and also utility disconnects and where we stand with those. So today's agenda is going to talk a little bit about the history of the suspension of disconnects for those that may not be familiar with it, as well as the associated executive orders from the governor. I'd also like to just give you a refresher on where we are with temporary residential tiered rate structure, utility bill revenue collection, kind of where we're at today compared to where we were just a few weeks ago under the manager's report, customer assistance programs that are available to our utility customers, and resuming utility disconnects. So on March 12th, Raleigh Water, due to the pandemic, chose to suspend utility disconnects and fees for non-payment. And we also, in addition to that, we turned off our late fees and reconnected previous disconnected accounts. A few days, a couple weeks later, Governor Cooper subsequently issued Executive Order number 124, which effectively did the same for all other utilities across the state, including power and gas. On May 30th, Governor Cooper extended that executive order to continue to the end of July. At the end of July, due to increasing debt and hardships for some utilities, the executive order was allowed to expire on July 30th, allowing disconnects for late fees and allowing disconnects and late fees to resume. The temporary amendment you may recall that occurred on April 7th, 2020, the City Council approved the adjustment of our residential Tier 2 from 10 CCF to 20 CCF. And what this did is it recognized the fact that many people who used to be working in offices were now working in their homes, and the way that our single-family residential tiered rate structure is, it is there to promote conservation. And so the more water you use, effectively, the more punitive it becomes, especially when you become into the elective use category, which is what we would consider Tier 3. So expanding Tier 2 effectively allowed more people to use water at home, recognizing that was a shift in use patterns without getting into that punitive tier. And it has worked. We have seen a substantial increase in residential use in the Tier 2, increasing around 41%. And we have seen a decrease in non-residential use along the lines of 23%. This temporary tiered rate structure is tied directly, or the expiration of this is tied directly to the Wake County Commissioner's proclamation of the current state of emergency. So it is set to expire within 30 days after that. And that 30 days is essentially to get a full billing cycle in so that everybody is treated the same. So here is a snapshot. We created a Power BI dashboard at the beginning of the pandemic to track our revenues and to see any changes so that we could be alerted and alert council of anything that may need to be adjusted. As you can see here, so on the y-axis is the past due amount in $1 million, and on the x-axis is the date. In the beginning, just before the pandemic, or right at the beginning of the pandemic and ending just a couple of days ago. And as you can see, on any given, let me back up, on any given day before the pandemic, the utility would have anywhere between $3.5 and $4.5 million in past due amounts on any given day. And as you can see, I think well, I can't do the cursor thing again because Michelle took my mouse. You can see the stair steps, if you will, per month. So it is slightly increasing per month, and we're in the $7.5 million in arrears area right now, which is about $3.5 to $4 million more than normal times. And this does represent all use classes. So here's a similar graph, but this is for total number of past due accounts that are above $125. And while that's important, is the $125 threshold is when we start our credit and collections process or our disconnection process. If you're past due, but you're not above that threshold, we don't start disconnects. So in this particular case, the same time frame on the x-axis, and we're floating around 12,000 accounts in arrears today that are greater than $125. And before COVID, we would hover around 8,000. So you're looking at about a 4,000 number of account increase. And to put that in perspective, we have about 194,000 accounts. So it's still, while the numbers aren't terrific, it is manageable. I would like to talk about, there are several customer assistance programs and plans, and the good news is those opportunities appear to be getting even better. Of course, we have, the first one I'll highlight is our Utility Customer Assistance Program. This is a program that has been established for a few years now. It is funded by City Council from the general fund in the amount of $200,000 per year. And in order for a customer to be eligible for this program, they must also qualify for Wake County's Low-Income Energy Assistance Program, which, to kind of put that in perspective, for a family of four is about income of family four is about $33,480. The next program that we have here is our Project Share. Our Project Share has the same eligibility criteria as the UCAP program. However, Project Share is funded by our customers who either elect to donate extra money on their utility bills every month, or would like to make a one-time payment, or for corporate donations as well. There has been minimal participation in this program so far, but we're hoping that will change soon. The Coronavirus Aid, Relief, and Economic Securities Act, the CARES funding, which the county coined Wake Helps. That's one of our bigger funding assistance programs to date, and I'll talk more about that on the next slide. Also, payment plans. We are extending COVID payment plans to individuals who are past due on their accounts. Prior to COVID, our typical payment plan was a 3-month payment plan. Our COVID payment plans that we're issuing today are a 12-month payment plan to help extend those costs even more, so we can hopefully get further down the road and spread those costs out for our customers. As recently as last week, the governor announced the eviction prevention and utility assistance funding. That does include the funding for housing, but it also includes funding for electric, gas, and water bills as well. That is in its infancy, and that is being ran or operated by the North Carolina Office of Recovery and Resiliency. We have reached out to them to get more details. We don't know if at this point if they're going to push that down to the counties or if they are going to administer the program themselves. And we don't know the percentage of funding for utility assistance versus housing and et cetera. But there will be more to come on that. Hopefully we can update you on a future manager's report. And in addition to that, Raleigh Water is continuing to explore some other funding sources that aren't directly tied to rates. As you may recall, that unfortunately in North Carolina, the rate funding or rate revenue for utilities cannot be used to subsidize other customers. but there may be some other opportunities and some other revenue streams that we may be able to use to help boost our utility or UCAP program. And if that's the case, we're working with our city attorney's office and the budget office, and hopefully we will be able to bring you a future council item for a budget amendment approval for that. So as I told you previously, I was going to dig a little deeper on the Wake Helps. It is $5 million in Federal CARES Act funding that was appropriated by the Wake County Commissioners for utility bill assistance. This does also include electric and gas, so the water component of that would be relatively small, and it's probably not going to be sufficient for the entire county. However, there may be some more opportunities. The county has mentioned there may be some other CARES Act funding that could be appropriated in this program as well, but just kind of waiting to see on what the response is after their announcement in early August of the program. The qualifications for this program are that you have to be a Wake County resident, you have to be financially impacted by COVID, and meet certain income limits to qualify. This program, the limits are substantially higher. As I mentioned, with the UCAP program was $33,000 and some change. This one for a family of four is $56,460 as a household income. And I do know we're still waiting on Wake County to provide us some more detailed information on the distributions that have been made to date and the number of applications for our customers. But within the first 10 days of inception, they did report that they had received over 1,100 applications. So our current plan for resuming late fees and disconnects are as follows. We are planning to resume late fees on September 19th, 2020. There's a couple reasons for moving forward with late fees. One, there are some customers that are able to pay their bills but are electing not to because the disconnect policy is not in place right now. And so hopefully a late fee would encourage those individuals to catch up on their utility bills. The late fee is $5 per bill. And the other thing is we would like to encourage our customers who are in arrears and to give them some incentive to call in for a payment plan to get those initiated. Once a customer sets up a payment plan, they will not be charged late fees on that balance. So that the payment plan takes that into consideration. So hopefully it'll incentivize the people who can pay to pay and incentivize the customers who can't pay to set up a payment plan that would make it more feasible for them to do so. As for disconnects, we still have some, the Attorney General's office had made some interpretations that essentially don't allow you to accelerate debt. So if a customer broke a payment plan, the way that the Attorney General's office interpreted that you could only require them to pay that broken payment plan piece that month. That's not the way our billing system, and it's very complicated, as you can imagine, with 194,000 accounts. That's not the way that our billing system is set up. The way that prior to COVID, if a payment plan was broken or the customer didn't pay their monthly bill during that period, then all of the debt associated with that payment plan was accelerated before a reconnect would be done. But unfortunately, our billing system doesn't allow for that, and it's a pretty significant undertaking to do so. I feel like by the time we were able to reprogram our system and do the proper testing to make sure there aren't any risk factors there, that we would be turning around and flipping it back over. And that Attorney General's interpretation was 6 months past the July 29th due date is when that would be effective. So that would be up to January 29th. So more to come on the disconnects. At this time, we don't have any plans to do so in the near future. So our next steps is to program or turn back on the late fees on September 19th, 2020, and also to continue to promote our customer assistance programs including payment plans. We have communicated this information on our website, social media. We actually have an Everbridge. We can do mass calls to our customer database. And so we, along with our communications department, collaborated to send a mass call out to all of our customers who had more than a $125 balance, which would have put them in the severance category. And so that went out last week. We've also sent out postcards and letters, and our call center representatives are also very familiar with the customer assistance programs. So as customers call in with the inability to pay their bills or to set up a pay plan, they can also steer them in other directions, such as the Wake County for the Wake Helps program. And with that, I will take any questions.
Okay, Councillor Melton.
Thank you. I have a question about, and I want to make sure I get the name right. I think it was Project Share, where other users can contribute towards someone else's water bill. I learned about this actually when I was doing the tour of our facilities, which feels like years ago, but it was just several months ago, pre-COVID. And I remember at the time asking some questions about the program. I understand that not a lot of folks are utilizing it right now, so I'm wondering if there's a better way for us to publicize it, but then also to make it easier to contribute. And I know one thing that I think we may have asked on the tour was, are you able to like round up your water bill so that the differential can go towards someone else's? Like, is there a better way for you to be a more passive participant? Because the easier we make a program for someone to use, the more likely we are going to get more people to contribute. And I think that in particular is going to be really important moving forward for folks with additional means to be trying to help our more vulnerable residents.
No question. We have worked with our communications department in the past to promote Project Share. We have a video on the website. We have had recent discussions with them as well to improve and to make a larger push for Project Share. So we're going to collaboratively work together on that to get the word out more. To answer your question directly about the bill roundup, we do not have that functionality at this time, but we are undergoing a new third-party payment software service, for lack of a better term, that would have that functionality. And also currently, customers can donate extra on top of their normal utility bills. If they wanted to pay, they can set it up automatically to pay $1 extra per month, $10, however much they want to. The corporate donations and, one-time donations up until recently were all done via check. We are, to your point, we're trying to make that easier for people to donate. And so we have worked with our revenue department, our revenue division over in the finance department, and now we're able to take credit card payments for one-time contributions to Project Share. But more to come on that, I think, is the takeaway as we continue to work with our communications department to advance that.
Councillor Buffkin.
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you, Mr. Brower, for your presentation. I think this reflects the kind of compassion and care for people that are going through a really rough time that is one of the guiding principles of this city as an organization and Raleigh Utilities. So I'm encouraged by what I see, and I appreciate y'all putting this effort. And thank you, Councilmember Melton, for raising that question. We've got some work to do. My sense is we have some work to do with getting the word out, and I'm glad you all are thinking about that. The Roundup program is something that could be very useful, but in conversation with staff, I've learned that it's going to be an expensive software upgrade, and it's going to take some time to put it in place. So as we're looking ahead to the next few months of challenges, I'm not sure that could get put in place in time. So I'm inclined to use the tools we got. And by way of a question, one of those tools is the change in the tiered rates. And that was really put in place without not as a measure to help people recover, but in recognition that we're all living our lives very differently than we used to. So I wonder if you could maybe address in some more detail the thinking about not maintaining the current adjustment to the tiers, and what would be the impact of continuing that policy going forward in recognition that we're all still at home. Could you share any thoughts with the council on that?
Are you specifically talking about revenue stream for the utility as a whole?
Well, yeah, yes, primarily, yeah.
At this point, we don't think there is a major impact associated with that. This past July was one of the metrics that we looked at. Unfortunately, this July was a lot wetter than last July, and of course that impacts our usage tremendously. We were down a little bit in total revenue compared to last July, which was about 6 to 9%, somewhere in that range, as far as the build or the build revenue. But I don't think it's going to have any long-term impacts on the utility to maintain that larger range Tier 2 structure at this juncture. We will continue to monitor that, of course, as we're monitoring all of those metrics daily.
Okay, thank you. Mayor, if I may follow up on that point about the tiered rates. So if you all are anticipating a disruptive impact to the utility revenues, well, maybe I should ask on the other side, how much is this helping folks who, particularly large families? That's I think the people who are most impacted, whereas, your family of 6 or 7 folks, were all gone from the house. Now all those people are at home using water. Do we have a sense of how much this is helping folks out?
I don't have specific dollars, but I do have some figures. And the one figure in particular that I think will help explain that is that compared to last July, we had a 73% reduction in our Tier 3 usage, which is our punitive tier, our higher rate tier. And so the fact that because we increased the Tier 2 range and kept those people, and we did have an increase in 42% in Tier 2, but that subsequently created a 73% reduction in Tier 3. So yes, there is about $1.50 difference per 748 gallons. We do 100 CCF, so I think better in gallons. But so it is fairly substantial, especially when you multiply that by the sewer rate as well.
Okay, well then, if I may, Mayor, make a suggestion. So what I'm hearing is that the change in the tiered rates doesn't really have a significant impact on utility revenue, but it's a big help to a good number of people. So maybe as a follow-up item, or maybe we could make a decision today. I'm going to suggest that we maintain our current adjustment in that second tier. I don't know how long we're going to all be staying at home, but I'm sure it's going to be many more months. And as a second suggestion, I certainly look forward to the budget amendment so we can help out and provide the funds we need. $220,000 in the customer cares program is not going to be enough to help out getting through this. So I'll offer those comments, and you can certainly respond. And I look forward to hearing from my colleagues and the mayor on this issue as well.
Mayor Pro Tem Branch.
Question is kind of for the city manager, maybe Mayor, you may know with your meetings with other mayors. Do we have an idea of when the county commissioners may end the state of emergency? Because our tiered rate is tied to not end until after that has ended. So to Councilmember Buffkin's point, though, I kind of don't see a need for us to make an announcement or decision today, not knowing when they may end their state of emergency.
Mayor, if I could. Let me speak to that on the broader sense, and then maybe to Councilmember Buffkin's question, a suggestion. So we put that in place at the time, really not knowing how that we were going to get out of the situation and how long it might last. So at 3 o'clock today, the governor is slated to announce some additional changes to the order in terms of some of the restrictions, et cetera. I think it's fair to say that the general state of emergency associated with the pandemic will not conclude anytime soon. I think we're talking about many months away. So I don't think this decision is at your doorstep. That's just the provision that we put in place. I think it would be very easy for us to commit to you that we would come to you with an active decision point on the tier rates going back. It solves it. And what I would suggest also, Mr. Bufkin, is that we simply start doing some policy analysis of your question outside the framework of the emergency framework. And Raleigh Water does that annually with the budget anyway and has made some adjustments on tier rates. So what I would suggest is that you just informally direct staff to do some analysis on the tier rates in the current set of conditions, and that we'll come back to you with a positive decision point about reverting on the rates. And we'll time that what makes sense. Last point and on that, if I could, is that I think that, and I'm not going to speak for Aaron or Robert or anybody else in Raleigh Water, I think there's also a question of when, quote, the state of emergency ends, will there be a permanent disruptive change in people's behavior that doesn't match the tier rate system that we had before? And I think that's an open question. We are certainly looking at that, thinking about that. Like to your point, Mr. Bufkin, kids are at school, they use water at school, or then they're at work, or then they're at their jobs and things like that. Will that change going forward in terms of what that balance looks like? I think what the utility is trying to do is avoid setting up punitive measures in a way that was unintended from its policy context. But what I would suggest is assign us the analysis of the tier rate question, and we'll bring it back to you before making a switch.
Okay. I think that sounds like a good plan. Everybody good with that? Okay. All right. Thank you. Thank you, Aaron.
Mayor, that's all I have for the manager's report. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. Next, we have the report and recommendation of the Economic Development and Innovation Committee. Councilor Melton.
Yes, we have one item to report out of committee, and that is our two strategic plan initiatives, arts and cultural resources, and economic development and innovation key focus areas. We have spent 2 meetings in committee making some recommendations to the proposal or draft that staff presented, and we feel comfortable with where we're at, and staff will be bringing back to the full council, I guess, a final draft for us to review and approve. So that's what we have.
Okay, will you be having a meeting in September?
We will be having a meeting in September. I think I need to firm up some of the details, so I will announce it at our next council meeting.
Okay,
but the meeting should be tentatively 1:30 Tuesday, September 22nd. I'll have more details at our next council meeting.
All right, thank you. Next is the report and recommendation of the Growth and Natural Resources Committee.
Thank you. We have no report today. All of our items remain in committee. Our next meeting will be 4 p.m. on Tuesday, September 22nd.
Okay. Next is the report and recommendation of the Safe, Vibrant, and Healthy Community Committee. Like EDI, we have approved the strategic plan review for the Safe, Vibrant, and Healthy Community key focus areas. Staff is working on some changes that we had requested and will be bringing that back to us for final approval. We are planning to have a meeting at 11:30 on 9/22, but we'll confirm that at our next meeting. Okay, next we have report and recommendation of the Transportation and Transit Committee.
Yes, we have two items. The first one is the same as previous committees. We actually are reporting out our strategic plan review plan to come back to the full council at a later date with the information of the corrections and so forth. The second piece is around micromobility. At our last meeting, we had already directed staff to move forward with the MEA as well as our RFQ. So we are just reporting out feedback that we have given staff, but also part of that feedback is we also asked the committee, we're asking the city manager to work with staff to produce a report on how the companies supply civic service back to the community as part of this agreement. A lot of times we have companies that come to the city, and basically I'm just asking how have these companies been community leaders and community sponsors and uplifting the community as a whole. So that's the second item that we are reporting out. Because we voted last meeting for staff to move forward, I'm not sure if we need a motion, but we are reporting these two items out with our next meeting to be September 24th at 3 p.m.
Okay, thank you. Next, we have a report from the mayor and city council. I will start with Councilor Buffkin.
Thank you, Mayor, members of council. In my report today, I want to take a moment to lift up and celebrate the events of this past weekend, including the prayer vigil that the mayor mentioned at the beginning of our meeting. Friday evening, we saw about 1,200 folks come to our downtown in the spirit of social justice, seeking reforms that are needed in our state and in our community. It was peaceful. There was minimal, even superficial damage to property. And Mayor, I thank you for providing the police with the tool of a curfew, which I think was indispensable in separating the people who come with a heart of peace and social justice from those who come with the intent to do ill. In our police department, the officers did an admirable job in enforcing that curfew, providing a safe environment for people to exercise their First Amendment rights, and enforcing the curfew through de-escalation tactics. And I would also note that the protesters that our officers interact with are our neighbors, and they are seeking out the justice that we need to heal this nation and this community. And these are difficult times. But what I saw this weekend was the city striking the appropriate balance. So to our officers and our command staff, I say thank you. This is a difficult time. You have a tough job. I know you feel criticized and undervalued. And we're asking you to do your job in a different way. And this is difficult but important work. So as we work to reforming our policing, I hope that you'll remember that the community does value your work, but we are going to ask you to do your job differently. And your participation and willingness to change is important, including, as an example, at our last meeting, the chief converting positions to social workers. This is going to help our community, and we're going to be doing police in a better way. And to those who peacefully protested on our streets Friday and earlier this summer, I also say thank you. This nation needed a wake-up call, and you have the attention of the nation, the state, and our community, and we are working hard to meet the call of this moment. Again, reforming policing is hard work, and your participation is essential to that, and it is appreciated. And I also want to share that at the prayer vigil on Saturday afternoon, protesters joined us, and they communicated their message. And as they walked out of Moore Square, they were applauded, and that applause was sincere. It came from the heart, and it is, I think, a signal that this community is beginning to reach consensus on the need for social justice and real reforms. So my door is open to these groups as we work on this. And finally, to the citizens of the city, I'd ask you to continue to look for ways to help. That's the question I hear most from people as I get out and talk with folks and do Zoom meetings. People want to help. So we all have a role to play in breaking down the vestiges of systemic racism. Often it's the small, almost unnoticeable ways that we treat people that can make a difference. And for those of you, and I know there's a lot of you out there that wake up every day worried about where we're headed, you can make a difference. And you can help us by seeking out the ways to help turn the tide of racism, and let us hear from you. So in closing, I want to acknowledge we have much work left to do in this area, but I see that we've already made progress in the right direction. And this past weekend was an example of how we could strike that balance. And I look forward to the work ahead. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Buffkin. Next, Councillor Cox.
Yes, I would just want to take a moment to explain the backdrop I'm using today. We're not going to have a state fair this year, and this is a picture I took from last year's state fair. One of the exhibits I really enjoy is where all the children come out across the state and within our Raleigh community, and they put together their artwork, and it goes on display at the state fair. So specifically behind me is artwork that has been produced by the students at Brentwood Elementary School. And I just wanted to feature this here. And I also want to mention to the city manager that these children are very much looking forward to the new playground at Brentwood Community Park. And I was wondering if I could get an update on that at the next meeting about where we're at, and so that these students, such as Yehuda Ortiz Arriaga, Allison Diaz-Perez, Olivia Medeiros, Emma Donnelly-Cott, Melanie Diaz-Perez, and Star Paulus, who created this artwork back here and have a playground that they can go to and they can be proud of. So if I could get that report at the next meeting, I would greatly appreciate it. Thank you.
Mayor, if I could, thank you, Mr. Cox. It actually turns out that on your work session on September 15th, we've already scheduled the updates on the bond projects for transportation and parks. So we are on the schedule, and we're happy to give you that update.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Knight.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I appreciate Councillor Buffkin's comments earlier. I just want to reiterate, I commend the preparation and the partnership that led to a successful outcome this weekend. It wasn't perfect. Public interaction is never going to be perfect, but I applaud the work of the city staff and leadership, the Raleigh Police Department, Downtown Raleigh Alliance, the Chamber, the protesters themselves and protest leadership that led to this. As we've seen in the past, by what happened in May, things could go bad, and they didn't. It wasn't perfect, and I really appreciate the volunteers that were out there on Saturday morning helping clean up the graffiti and some other damage that occurred. But I think the city as a whole, the community, can be proud of itself. We heard the words, and we need to continue to hear these words. The underlying issues of the protest are still ongoing, and we need to continue to deal with them and reckon with them. And as a community, I think we need to do this, and we'll continue to, and let's take this on as a community. So thank you for all of your hard work, and look forward to continue to work on these issues with not only the council, the staff, but also the rest of the community. Thanks.
Councillor Fort.
Good afternoon. I'd like to echo the sentiments of Councilmember Buffkin and Knight as relates to the peaceful protests and all the hard work of the staff in terms of getting everything coordinated to keep our citizens safe, but also make sure the protesters had the right to, express themselves, which is very, very important. I'd also like to thank the staff for putting together the report as relates to the COVID-19 availability for testing and distribution of PPE. I would encourage folks to look at the city manager's report from Friday if they have any questions about where they can get tested. There appears to be a lot of, free testing sites available in coordination with the State Department of Human Services as well as the county. And they've included some links where folks can sign up and get testing. So I think that's very, very important as we continue to manage the pandemic, and I appreciate staff putting that report together. Thank you.
Okay. Councillor Stewart.
Thank you. I have just one item, and it's a follow-up from the city manager's weekly report as well. Last council meeting, we heard about the challenges community garden operators face in setting up produce stands on their sites in residential zoning. So staff followed up with the report, and I want to thank them for that. And after reviewing it, I would like to move that we initiate a text change that would allow on-site sales in residential districts as a permitted use. And if I need to add anything to that motion, please let me know.
Do we have a second? Councillor Fort? Okay. Any questions? Oh.
I don't have a question, Madam Mayor, but I did meet with the folks at the Well-Fed Community Garden on Sunday and spent about 2 hours talking to them and realized the passion that they have for providing fresh produce, especially in areas where we've got like a food desert here or several food deserts in the city of Raleigh. So their work is very, very important, and I support Councilmember Stewart in her motion.
Okay, thank you. Okay, all in favor? Opposed? Okay, motion, clerk, passes unanimously. Councillor Melton.
Thank you. I have a couple of things. I will try to be brief, and I'm going to start with something very light. I just want to thank staff and the other members of the Transportation and Transit Committee, especially Mayor Pro Tem Branch, for the time we have spent on the issue of micromobility. I know given current circumstances, the issue seems pretty small based on what we've been facing as a city, but it is a very important issue, and it's something that I campaign strongly on. And I think sometimes what's happening gets lost in the procedure of it, but what we basically did was we put together a new standard for how micromobility can excel in our city. We gave staff the authority to contract with the providers, and hopefully very soon we're going to be seeing more micromobility options in the market in Raleigh, and a place that we can really lead on this issue. I think it's really important to get people out of their cars, and now more than ever engaging with our businesses, especially downtown. So I'm very excited about that. A couple of other issues I want to address as they relate to this past weekend. One of those issues was it was brought to my attention that there were some legal observers were arrested during the demonstrations and protests this weekend, and we had asked the city attorney's office to look into that issue. So I'm just wondering if the city attorney could provide some feedback.
Yes, Councillor Melton. I'm just going to do a brief sort of high-level overview. Legal observers are individuals who attend demonstrations and protests where there's an expectation that there will be both protesters and law enforcement personnel who are present. They are there to assist the protesters, monitor and record law enforcement activities and interactions with the protesters. They obtain training from a national organization called the National Lawyers Guild. However, they can be attorneys, but it's not required to be an attorney to be a legal observer. With respect to the curfew and the exemptions, at this particular curfew that was just imposed, there was not an exemption from the curfew for legal observers. It actually did not come to our attention until shortly before the protest that they were had an interest or were going to be present. So with respect to this particular curfew, they were not in the list of exemptions. I've gotten a question whether they could be, and the answer to that is yes. Hopefully we won't have to have another curfew, but if we do, then that's something that the mayor and with council's consultation could discuss and make a decision about how to deal with that going forward should another curfew be available. So if you have any other questions, I'll try to answer them, but I hope that's what you needed from me.
I don't know if you know this information, but so basically what I'm hearing is that the law treats legal observers as any other participant in a protest, even though they may actually be there not maybe to be protesting, but to be watching the protest to make sure that the laws and the rights are being protected.
Yes, but let me just say that everybody in the city of Raleigh is subject to the curfew too. It's just not the protesters. So unless you are, going to the doctor or doing one of those activities that are accepted. So it's not just like it's a curfew for protesters. So we're saying everybody in the city of Raleigh needs to stay home unless you're doing these certain things or fall in this certain group. So they are basically in a bucket, and so are the protesters are in that same group as well. So you would have to pull them out and treat them different from all of the other residents that don't fall within an exception, which includes medical personnel, law enforcement, some overnight processing facilities, deliveries such as Amazon, are the ones that had appeared in prior curfews and were in this curfew as well, if that makes sense. So it's not like you're trying to say, it's just about the protest. The curfew is to both protect, anybody across the city.
Got it. So they're not already preemptively exempted under the law, but we could have included them as an exemption, or we could if there's another curfew.
Yes.
Could we get a report back from the city attorney on what other cities, how other cities handle this? So we have some idea. I know that you haven't probably had enough time to do that research, but I would like some information from other communities on how they handle this.
We can do that. We tried to do some quick research, and I'll tell you, we haven't found anything a lot yet, but as you said, we haven't had a lot of time, and that's been just a cursory look. So we will find out all that we can.
Okay. Councilor Cox.
Just a quick question to go along with this. Are we as members of council subject to arrest if we're out there violating curfew?
Well, there are, I think if you look at I'll have to pull out the curfew. I think if you're out on city business and doing city type of government work that you would fall within the curfew. I think if you tried to, go out and do something that was completely unrelated to your governmental job, that perhaps you would be. So the idea originally is to, have what I guess we've known essential activities is a new word that we know that we never really knew before, but that, things like that are generally what is accepted, which would include city business, if you will.
Okay.
And I just have two more things. I agree that it's really important that we are listening to the voices who are in the streets protesting and concerns that they are raising. I also think that we need to go a little bit beyond listening and take some action. And to that end, there are two issues that I'd like to look at addressing. One, I'd like to ask for a report on the location of the substations we've invested in the last 10 years, where they're located and what data we used in creating those substations. Is that something, City Manager, that your office could provide and also be available publicly?
Certainly, we'd be happy to get your report.
Question.
The second piece, oh, sorry, go ahead.
Do you mean substations or district offices?
Well, I know that, how about we just do precincts and substations, the physical structures we've invested in the community, and where they're located and what data we use. Is that enough direction? Is everyone okay with that? And then the second piece, there has been a lot of discussion about where we are investing our city resources and a focus on sort of uplifting our residents and folks in the city of Raleigh. And I think it would be helpful to have a work session on what programs the city currently funds for job development, housing, and access to food and other resources, and what programs the county funds that the city participates in. I think that will give everyone sort of a base level understanding of what we're already doing, which I think lends itself to a discussion of what else should we be doing. And so I think we've got some available work sessions coming up, and I'd like to do one on this issue. So that would be programs that we as a city currently fund and maintain for job development, housing, food, building up the community. What the county does, and it may be helpful to have someone from the county there as well, and then we can sort of use that as a baseline. So I'd like to request that work session.
Okay. Everybody good with that?
That is all I have.
Okay. Thank you. Mayor Pro Tem Branch.
Thank you, Mayor, and other councilors. We all have definitely want to thank those that protested this past weekend, voicing their concerns, as well as those that attended the prayer visual. But one thing I wanted to mention, recently I attended an REI groundwater training, thanks to work with the Dix Conservancy. But one of the things it focused highly on was systems and how systems impact race. And this is a training, I know that it was about 3 hours long, kind of giving an overview to start the dialogue and the conversation. And I know we have our Office of Equity and Inclusion. So I'm asking a couple things here. One, an update on where we are with our training for council members, where we are in that process, but also a look at this REI groundwater training, maybe for our directors and city managers. Again, it was about 3, maybe 4 hours long, one-day session, something that starts the dialogue and the conversation about systems. And when you look at equity, when you look at income and you look at education, even with education and even with incomes, a lot of the factors that impact our community comes back really to race. So if we can really look at that, that's I only have 3 things, but that's the first thing I wanted to mention. The next thing is we had a heavy rain event last night. And for years, we've talked about our stormwater treatment and equipment and requirements, 10-year storms, 10, 15, 50 years, and 100-year weather events. I know one of the things that we talked about then is where we are in updating that process on what is needed in handling stormwater. If we can just get an update on where staff is, or if staff has even started looking at any modifications of our requirements due to these new weather events, because a 10-year storm in 2020 isn't the same as a 10-year storm in year 2000. I think Ruffin had a...
City Manager.
Mayor, if that's okay. Mr. Branch, we'll be happy to get you a report on that. Just really quickly for the audience's benefit, those 50-year, 25, 100-year maps are federal maps. So it's not completely up to us. We get involved with that, and they are in the process of talking about not only looking at the maps, but whether or not they need to change the definitions. So we agree with you that structure framework needs to be addressed. So we'll get you a report, but just for the benefit of citizens, those are federal maps.
Okay, thank you. And the last thing I have is recently it came to my attention that at Duplex Village, property off of New Bern Avenue, there's some evictions that are taking place. If staff can just get an update to council on what's going on with that property. And also, I know this was another issue in another jurisdiction a couple years ago in which we partnered with the county. If we need to work with our county partners, other partners to help these citizens. But if we can just get an update on that situation there, it will be greatly appreciated so we know which actions to take next. All right. Thank you. That is all I have.
Okay. Thank you, Councilor Branch. I've been asked to just formally announce Councilor Fort's committee assignments and liaison structure. So Councilor Fort is a member of the Growth and Natural Resources Committee. She serves as vice chair. She's also a member of the Safe, Healthy, and Vibrant Community Committee. And she will serve as a liaison to the Appearance Commission, the Human Relations Commission, the Hillsborough Street CSC, and Sister Cities. So I just wanted to make that public announcement, and also for the clerk. I also like to commend all the peaceful protesters. When you have 1,200 people who come to your city, everybody showed a lot of restraint. I also want to commend our police response. So I think somebody said, Councilor Knight, I believe it was, who said it wasn't perfect, but when you have 1,200 people in your city, you're not going to have perfection. But I think that everybody should be commended for what they did and the restraint that they showed. And finally, I would like to ask the city manager for an update on the Salvation Army property in the parking lot at City Market. There's been discussion for any number of years about how that property may be repurposed. And I'd like an update on what we're doing. So that is it for me.
Mayor?
Yes.
I have a question. You announced Councilor Fort as the liaison to Sister Cities, which is something you had actually appointed me to sort of after the first round of liaison appointments. Were you intending to swap us?
Actually, that did not show up on the sheet, okay. Your appointment. So why don't the two of you discuss it and decide who's going to do that? And yes, and I apologize, but it said it had staff on there.
Yeah, that was because I actually asked to be appointed after we did the initial ones because I saw it was open, but I'm happy to coordinate with Councilor Fort as to which one of us will handle it, just as long as someone's there.
You can go in the hallway and fight it out. How's that?
It doesn't come with a stipend for international travel, so don't fight too hard.
No. Okay, let's see. Appointments. Clerk?
Yes, on the Appearance Commission, you have one vacancy. Carter Chenemer, and I'm sorry if I'm pronouncing that wrong, received 4 votes, so that will be carried over to the next meeting. Parks, Recreation, and Greenway Advisory Board, Mayor Pro Tem Branch and Councilor Fort nominated Rashawn King. Councilor Melton nominated Dean Raines. Councilman Knight nominated Christina Jones. And Councilman Knight also nominated Malay Patel. So that will be carried over to the next meeting.
And so, I'm going to have a nomination as well from a member of our Hispanic community.
Okay. So it'll be on the next agenda for additional nominations and action. The next is Substance Use Advisory Commission. You have 1 vacancy. Nicholas Sovac received 3 votes. Holly Watkins received 5. So Holly would be appointed to that position. The next item is nominations. And here we have another opportunity for Substance Use Advisory Commission. You have 1 vacancy. As a letter of resignation has been received from Pamela Patrick, who has moved out of town, so is no longer eligible. So,
okay, Clerk, yes. I want to acknowledge Councilor Branch. He had his hand raised.
Yes, since we had 2 nominees for the Substance Use Advisory Committee already, if it's not without objection, because we could only vote for 1 based on the ballot, I would like to move for the appointment of Nicholas Salvacia to the Substance Use Advisory Committee at this time, since he's already been nominated.
And that has been seconded by Councilor Melton. All in favor? Any opposed? Okay. Motion passes unanimously, Clerk.
Very good.
We have filled our 2 vacancies.
Correct. I'm very proud of you. The next item is the Human Relations Commission, and as indicated on the agenda sometime back, you asked that this be held until such time as the work session on the commission took place, which it did, and you provided direction to Dr. Cesar. And so if it's timely, I would place this on the next agenda for the nominations to start. And I think that department will be breaking them down into the various categories that you had suggested to make it easier to have the diversity and all that you want on that commission. So if there's no objection, I will place this on the agenda for appointments at the next meeting.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, and that's all I have today.
Okay, thank you. Next, we have the report and recommendation of the city attorney.
Mayor, I'm sorry, I think Councilmember Cox said something on HRC.
Yeah, I just had a quick question for Gail. I had emailed forward a nomination to the Human Relations Commission. I was wondering if I need to do anything further.
I don't think so. I will make sure that your suggestion is forwarded to the appropriate parties and considered along with the recommendations they make.
Okay, and the name is Nura Elatati.
Correct. I saw I saw the email going forward, and we will handle it in that manner if there's no objection.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
Okay, thank you. Next is the report and recommendation of the city attorney.
I do not have a report today, Mayor.
Okay. And then we have the report and recommendation of the city clerk.
And the only
clerk, you're muted.
Just can't get this right. You received the minutes of the August 18th regular session for consideration.
Okay. Do we have a motion to approve? Councilor Buffkin, second by Councilor Cox. All in favor? Opposed? Clerk passes unanimously.
And that's all I have.
Okay, I have a motion to enter into closed session. GS 143-318-11A3 to consult with the city attorney to preserve the attorney-client privilege and to give instructions concerning the handling and or settlement of a potential claim.
Second.
Thank you for seconding. Mayor Pro Tem, all in favor? Okay, let's take a 10-minute break and mute and turn off your cameras, and let's be back here in 10 minutes. Thank you. Thank you. The council met in closed session and we provided direction to staff on the items that were brought forward. And now we'll be back at 7 o'clock and the meeting is adjourned until then.